What if the 1952 Stalin Note was accepted? Actually, to tell the truth, I had never even heard of the Stalin Note before stumbling on it a few days back on Wikipedia. So for all of you who haven't never heard of this note, you are not alone. But what if the Stalin Note was accepted? Well, let's first take a look at what the Stalin Note even was. In 1952, Germany basically looked like this. It was split up into 4 different sections, each under the rule of a different nation. The 3 Allied powers combined their share, while Stalin kept his piece of the pie to himself. Then came the surprise. Now, while everyone had this image of Stalin as an autocratic, bloodthirsty tyrant, he apparently had a change of heart in his so-called Stalin Note. On March 10th of 1952, Stalin sent a note that proposed the reunification of Germany, basically 40 years before it happened in our timeline. But there were also some fine points. There were no conditions in the economy, but Stalin also had a change of heart apparently, and said that it could be democratic and neutral. Here is an excerpt in which he guaranteed the rights of man and basic freedoms, including freedom of speech, press, religious persuasion, political conviction and assembly, and free activity of democratic parties and organizations. Wow, this man must have been switched out with an identical twin or something, because that is not the Stalin we all know and love. The Allied powers were thinking the same thing too. Why in the world would Stalin want a democratic, independent Germany on his doorstep? They thought that he was faking it or lying, because there was no motive at all for Stalin to have such a thing. However, they also tried to test his proposal, because no one wanted to give up reunification that fast. Basically, they came to the conclusion that it was a sham, and anyway, Germany couldn't defend itself from the Soviets if the time came. And it would be straddling some complex relations between the East and the West. After a bunch of complex negotiations, about 3 more Stalin notes, the agreement fell through, and thus Germany remained divided until the late 1900s. What if in an alternate timeline, the Stalin note was accepted? Well, for that to happen, several key things would have to happen. In our timeline, the Allies wanted an independent Germany to become part of the European defense community, which was basically all of the Western powers. So that was a big no-no for Stalin. Also, there were disagreements over how to do the process anyway. And the leader of West Germany at the time, Conrad, I can't say his last name, had some personal motives for not reuniting. First of all, Conrad, can we just call you Conrad from now on, was a Catholic, and the East German people were mainly Protestant. Also, he didn't like a political party that had many supporters in East Germany. So those were some personal reasons why the deal fell. Also, the West Germans wanted their place to be integrated with the West, so Stalin of course refused that. If the deal were to happen, Conrad would have to put aside his personal feelings, and of course the West would have to agree with Stalin's terms, or Stalin with the West, which is why this is unlikely. Let's look at 2 separate scenarios. Let's first say that the West agreed with Stalin. Then what would happen? Well, the independent Germany is formed in 1952, only about 7 years after the end of World War II. This means that no shocking difference is found between the 2 halves of the nation. East Germany is slightly poorer than the West, but not by much. The Germans begin to rebuild together, but since they aren't as closely allied with the West, the Soviets begin to slowly encroach. The Western Alliance is never signed, so Stalin is basically free to move in. He first subjugates Germany, all of Germany in this timeline, and moves bit by bit into Western Europe. Now this is like the worst nightmare of the Americans. I think some form of retaliation is in order. However, there is no alliance among the Western powers, so the US watches helplessly, not wanting to risk war. This would be kind of like how the West treated Hitler before World War II, waiting, watching to see what would happen. Eventually, I think that the continental Europe would basically turn communist, or a communist puppet state. This will be a decisive blow to the Americans, the first major loss of the Cold War. This also means that Europe is basically going to be poorer in this timeline, with a communist regime and all. Brutal crackdowns and riots are the norm in Europe, and Stalin goes back on his promises in this time. So Stalin goes back on his promise, no surprise there. Today, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, Europe is much worse off, economically and politically. Hey, wait, what's that? Okay, okay, I guess it's fine. Okay, so even today we can see how worse off East Germany is compared to the West. This will be the case across all of Europe, still reeling from the Soviet influence. What about if Stalin relented? Then Germany would be more closely allied with the West, would be part of the EDC. The Soviets would lose the bridgehead of their satellite states. Their hold over Eastern Europe would be somewhat weakened. Germany today is like any other Western European nation, fully unified and thriving economically. The deep societal divisions present today between East and West never come to be. The Stalin note is often forgotten part of world history, but it had the potential to change world history forever. The West and Stalin didn't see eye to eye. The rejection of the note led to years of division, the Berlin Wall, crackdowns, and a voodoo in Germany. If the note was accepted, there will be two potential scenarios. One nightmarish, one slightly better off than the one we inhabit today. This goes to show, in the course of human history, countless decisions could have gone differently and rendered our planet completely alien to us. This is Scholar of the World signing out. Thanks for watching. For another video on the Soviet Union, make sure to click here to find out what if the Soviets won the Soviet-Afghan War. Thanks for watching.